II service for the Montgomery County Historical Society's World War II series in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of our entry into World War II. You will be given a copy of this videotape, and there will be 2 copies deposited in the library. So I guess we'll start out with asking where you were born and about your, and when.
Okay. I was born in Ottumwa, Iowa in August of 1923.
And your parents were who?
Oh, Arthur and Dorothy Pumroy.
And you lived there until you left to go into war?
Basically, yes. Graduated from high school there at Ottumwa in 1941, which was not a good year for a guy to be graduating from high school. But from there, my dad talked me into going to business college to learn shorthand, typing, bookkeeping, and so on. And with that, I was able to get into employment with the people who were building the Naval Air Station there.
Oh, and
at Ottumwa.
What? And were you drafted, or did you volunteer?
No. While I was at the Naval Air Station working there, the officer in charge of construction, the Navy officer in charge of construction, suggested that I might want to beat the draft and enlist in the Navy because he had a deal for me.
Huh? What was the deal?
He said, you enlist, and I'll guarantee you that I'll bring you right back here to Ottumwa to work at the Naval
So that's
Air
where you
Station.
stayed?
So I stayed right there, yes.
For how long?
Until July 1st of 1943.
Did you have to go to boot camp first?
We went to, well, there were 4 or 5 of us that had this same arrangement. We went to Great Lakes Naval Station, not Naval Air. And got our shots, our uniforms, our indoctrination, if you will, into the Navy, and turned around and came back. Not actually boot camp.
Well, what services did you perform at the Ottumwa?
I was in the administrative office, and this was still basically in the process of construction, although at the Naval Air Station there were some cadets being trained at that time for flying. Along about February or March of that year, though, there was an announcement, this was in early 1943, there was an announcement on the board that there was an officers training program being developed, and we were interested, sign up, take some tests, see what happened.
Now, was this just the young men that had the deal and went to Great Lakes, or was it available to everybody?
It was available to everyone on the base. And we took the test. First, physical, of course. Everyone has to have that.
So then the name of the program was the V-12 program.
The Naval V-12 program, yes.
Was there any significance in the number 12?
They had run out of designations, I think. There was a B1, a B2, a B4, B5 for air cadets. B6 was General Navy enlistees, if you will. B7, I think, was also for air training. So, for whatever
They
reason,
just got up to 12.
They came up to 12.
Was the whole program just started in July 1943 everywhere?
Everywhere, all over the country.
And you came to Wabash College. Was that a surprise?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
I did not. Step number 1, after we were selected, I went to St. Ambrose College.
Where's that?
In Davenport, Iowa. It's a Catholic school, one of the few Catholic schools that were involved with the V-12 program. I might mention that on the various tests that we took, besides the physical, of course, there was I suppose, an IQ test similar to that. And there were probably about 200 of us that took the test.
At St. Ambrose?
No, at the Naval Air Station. And from that group then, a selection board decided who out of the 200 and some would go to B-12. And the quota for that Naval Air Station was 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the announcement came out as to the 5, and I was named first alternate.
Mm-hmm.
About 2 weeks later, the quota was increased by 1.
That's interesting.
The people on the selection board, there were 3 officers. The personnel officer for the name of Candelet, training officer for the name of Ziegler, and Nixon, Richard M.
Richard M. Nixon.
Mm-hmm. So
It was that.
I saw a spot in my heart for him for many years.
Did you see him again after that selection process?
No, not in the Navy, until he became active in politics.
Yeah.
But anyhow, from there we went to St. Ambrose College.
Mm-hmm. And how long did you stay there?
8 months. The B-12 system was set up in quarters going the year round, 4 months per quarter, with the idea that it would take 16 months then to complete the program at colleges, and then go on to midshipman school and eventually get a commission.
So that's equivalent of 2 years of college.
2 years of college, in one sense, except that the curriculum was such, it was a 17.5-hour requirement
First quarter.
per quarter, all 4 quarters, with no electives. Basically, it was a science course. Math, physics, chemistry. There was a smattering of English and a smattering of history. And the rest of it was science, other than the physical training, of course.
So you were there for 2 quarters.
2 quarters at St. Andrews.
And then how did you happen to come to Wabash?
We were sent.
Sent.
You know, once you're in the Navy,
Yes.
you don't select.
Well, I was wondering why they would make the change.
I think St. Ambrose was not able to provide the labs and the instructors for some of the courses that were wanted in the second year, if you will,
So then you came to Wabash College for your second year.
for the second year.
And when was that?
That was in 1944. Let's see, that would have been in February. It was cold, very cold. We arrived on the Monon coming out of Chicago, and really, there was a pot-bellied stove at the end of the coach. And there were about 20 of us.
All from St. Ambrose.
All from St. Ambrose, right. And we arrived about 2 o'clock in the morning, cold, and there was no one to meet us. We didn't have the slightest idea where we were or where we were going. Okay.
So what did you do?
We walked down the middle of the street until we found the phone, woke someone up.
Did they not know you were coming? Was that the reason?
I
they didn't
have
meet you?
no idea what the problem was, but they didn't meet us.
And then they had to find a place for you to live.
I'm sure they were expecting us, but maybe not at that specific time.
And where did you live? Did you live in a dormitory or?
Well, the fraternities were rather empty at that time for some reason. So we lived at the Fidel House.
Fidel House. Now that is not the Fidel House that's there now.
Part of it.
That was added on to.
That has been remodeled tremendously since then, but it was the original building, but prior to all the renovation.
Well, now you mentioned that there were no electives.
That's right.
When you were in Wabash College, there were no electives either?
None whatsoever.
Now, Jack Charles was the only person on the faculty of the 12 program, indicated that there were some electives, that he even had some people taking Greek.
That may have been some other B12s that came in from a different route.
Nice.
Those that had some college background had the opportunity, I'm sure, for electives, but most of the people did not. You mentioned Dr. Charles. He did teach one course for the straight B12s, naval history.
Mm-hmm. I was asking him about that. Did you enjoy his course?
Well, it was quite a relief after all the math and the physics and the chemistry. Yes.
He's
quite a change.
He had spoken about students who come back through the years saying that was one of the most interesting courses they had ever taken.
Oh yes, it was quite interesting, but as I say, it was also
Yeah.
a relief.
Now, with this 17 and a half hours, did you have a lot of homework to do on top of that?
Are you kidding? Obviously. Well, with any math course or any science course, there's a lot of problems to work out.
Mm-hmm.
One of the courses, for example, was navigation, celestial navigation, of course, and that takes some time.
Now, any of the people that might have stayed on at Wabash College, do you remember who taught some of the courses you took?
I'm not sure I follow your question.
Well, most of the people were local. Some of them were Wabash College professors or people that they brought in especially for the program.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering who you might have had for courses.
The only one was Dr. Charles.
Oh.
That I
The rest of
recall.
the courses were taught by Navy people?
No. They were professors at that time, but I thought you meant when I came back
No,
afterwards to finish up.
no, I'm talking about during the program.
No, I don't recall any
Yeah.
of them
No.
at a later time.
Of the ones that are listed in the civilian directory, Dr. Charles is the only one still here in Crawfordsville, but
Yes.
he told me that some of the others are still alive elsewhere, people I never.
Well, that could well be,
Yeah.
yes.
Did you mix it all with the civilian students? There weren't many.
At that time, there were only a handful. Many of those, for various physical reasons, were unable to go to the service.
Or too young, right?
No, not really too young. Well, in fact, the V12 program was open to men from 17 to 23.
Uh-huh.
So there weren't too many that were too young.
Did you get into any of the sports activities that the program had?
The program really didn't have any sports activities as far as what we know now in the way of sports, intercollegiate, basketball, football, and so on.
Well, I understood they played DePaul.
They
Couple
may-
football games.
They may have.
But maybe before you came.
It could have been, yes. You have to realize that in addition to the studies, there was a tremendous amount of physical requirements too. That is, training programs.
Drilling.
Yes, for one. But we would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and fall in for roll call in front of Fidel House.
You knew you were in the Navy.
Yes. And run from there to the track, do calisthenics for about a half hour, and then several laps around the track. Now that was one part of the physical program, but in addition to that, there was physical training each day during the day, so that by the time classes were out, there weren't too many that wanted to be involved too much in physical activities.
What about social activities? Was there a USO or something like that?
There was a USO in town in Crawfordsville, but that was not patronized too much, frankly. There was in Davenport, Iowa, where St. Ambrose was, there was a large USO, and more along the lines of what you think of as a USO.
Well, I guess the question comes down, I know you met your wife here.
Yes, that's true.
How did you meet her?
As did many others.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I might explain first of all that in addition to going to classes 5.5 days a week. We were also confined to quarters each evening from 7 to 10 for study, and then lights out at 10. So from Sunday night at 10 o'clock until Saturday afternoon, we had no time for social life. More than, maybe a phone call or Coke or something like that. So naturally, come Saturday afternoon, we were free until 10 o'clock Sunday night to do as we liked. So that was the social time, at least. And I happened to run into my wife to be in town.
And you say several others did too?
Several others wound up marrying local girls.
Well, were they from the St. Ambrose?
No.
Or from another group?
From another group. But the Navy moved them around considerably. Amazing.
Did you have naval instructors as well as the civilian?
Only for the physical training. I was trying to think. I don't recall any other naval instructors as such in the B-12 program itself.
Well, there was a commandant, though.
Oh, yeah, there was the head man was an officer, of course.
Yeah.
But basically, other than for discipline and for the physical training again, everything was run by the college as far as the instruction was concerned.
How was the food?
Well, the usual complaints. Institutional food is never all that great, but overall it was not bad. With that kind of physical training, we were usually hungry.
So where was the mess hall?
About where Wall Hall is now. That was back in the days when Peck Hall was still on campus.
Who?
Peck.
Oh, yes,
Hall.
Peck Hall.
And mess hall was there.
Any other things about the B-12 program that you'd be interested in sharing with us?
Well, it certainly kept us busy, to say the least. And it was rigorous as far as the academic requirements were concerned. And one of the problems was that it was a combination of people who had enlisted prior to the B-12 program and could be up to age 23. That was part of the group. That was maybe 10% of the group. The rest of the group was made up of high school seniors just out of high school, or men who had graduated from high school and had been in college for a year or two. You can imagine that for some who had been out 2, 3, 4 years, it was a lot tougher to start studying.
Now, you said the academic standards were high. Were they similar to the Wabash College in their standards?
I think so, yes. Well, their standards were high, and if you didn't make them, you packed up and was sent to wherever.
Enlisted.
Back to enlisted, yes. I might mention that in order to get into that program, in order to stay in the program, any ratings that the person might have had were taken away, right down to apprenticing.
Apprenticing.
The lowest rating in the Navy.
And you stayed that way?
You stayed that way until...
What was the pay like?
$50 a month.
$50 a month. Well, of course, most of your needs were taken care of.
Well, room and board.
Yeah.
Clothing, of course.
You didn't save much out of it.
No, hardly.
Was there any sort of closing ceremony when you left?
No, that was not really an end to the program. That was almost the start of it.
Oh, it went on after you...
Well, the idea was to prepare us for midshipman school,
Oh.
in effect. So when we left Wabash, we were presumably heading for midshipman school. But there were a limited number of midshipman schools. So there was a holding area at Asbury Park, New Jersey, where we stayed for several months, again during the winter, until we were finally pulled out to go to midshipman school.
And what did you do there? I mean, what sort of, how did you
Pass the time.
pass the time?
We were in the Navy, Gene. They kept us busy. Drilling, physical activities of all kinds, some lectures.
Never got on the ship though?
Not at that point.
Okay.
No formal training at Asbury Park.
Well then, when you went to midshipman school, this must be getting pretty much towards the end of the war.
Pretty close. Went to midshipman school, February or March of 1944. Beg your pardon?
Came here?
It would have been 45. And I was sent to Notre Dame. So, spent about 3 months there to final commission.
Did you have any leaves during that time when you could go
Oh,
home?
yes. Usually between terms and Christmas time.
Well, that's at midshipman school. There wasn't any time between.
Oh, yes, there was time between quarters. From between the first quarter and the second quarter at St. Ambrose, and between the second quarter and the third quarter at Wabash, and then on down the line. There was a break, yes.
Well, I know the faculty complained that they didn't get any break.
They were going straight through.
Yeah.
Well, there was some break.
I wondered.
They didn't get a summer break like they're used to.
Yes, that's right. But they said the only time they got off was Christmas.
That's about right.
Well, then when you, how long was midshipman school?
About 3.5 months.
The war was really coming close to it.
Well, during that time, VE Day came along. So, got my commission.
As a ensign?
Ensign, yes. Then I was sent to communication school at Harvard. And while I was there, VJ Day came along.
Well, that's a good way to spend the war, isn't it?
It wasn't too bad, I'll tell you. And then when that was over, I was sent to San Diego, and eventually sent to Tacoma, Washington, to put a small aircraft carrier into commission. And there were a bunch of us, of course.
And then, did you get on the aircraft carrier? I mean,
Oh yeah, we were on it.
Yeah, you were serving on it.
Right.
And where did it go?
South. We left Tacoma, stopped at San Francisco and San Diego, went farther south, went through the canal, and then back up the Atlantic side to Norfolk. Surprising enough, by then, my points had accumulated sufficiently, so I got out of the Navy.
Oh, that's very interesting. Did you stay in the reserves then?
Well, once you got a commission, you were in the reserves for 10 years.
But you didn't get called up again to Korea?
Called.
Well, then after, when you got out of the Navy, you went back to Tumwater?
Briefly, but then came back to Crawfordsville. My wife and I got married, started back in Wabash again.
And that took you another 2 years?
2 years.
And what did you take your degree in?
Psychology, if you believe. As a major, and then history and economics minor.
Now, did any of the other B-12 students that you know come back to Wabash too?
Yes, I'm sure there were some. In fact, there are 3 or 4 in my class that I correspond with. Well, I was class agent.
Yes, that's right. That was the class of
48.
48. So you weren't too much older than the college students that...
Actually, no,
Mhm.
no, a little bit, but
Mhm.
actually in our class of 48, there were people who had started as early as 1939.
I know when you look at the alumni directory, it's kind of hard to tell people's ages as they graduated in those classes. Because,
Exactly right.
you know, let's see, what I want to ask next. Did these other V12 returnees marry Crawfordsville girls too? Was that partly what brought them back?
Not necessarily,
Oh.
no, not at all.
And I'm sure that you decided to come to Wabash College because of your wife. Was that the reason you chose?
No, I just like Wabash.
Oh. But she was a factor?
Oh, naturally.
You better say
I
that.
better say that.
Okay, so you came back to Wabash College, and were you married while you were still in school then?
Yes, for the last 2 years.
And where did you live?
At her house.
Oh, not in Mud Hollow.
Not in Mud Hollow. Not at that time.
Tell us about Mud Hollow. I don't think...
Well, after the war, with so many returning servicemen who were married, some of whom had children, the college decided to build some student housing, like many of the other colleges around the country. So those were available.
Were they Quonset huts?
In effect, yes.
I've heard some stories about life in Mud Hollow, and I think it was still in existence in use when we came here in 1955.
Probably so, yes. Well, they all had tin roofs. So if you had a rainstorm, you could tell it quite quickly.
Now, you have mentioned that you went to reunions, B-12 reunions?
No, I
I
haven't.
thought you said you had.
No. There was a national B-12 reunion last year that I didn't attend, but one of the fellows in my class, 48, who was also a B-12, did attend.
Show us your hat.
And that's where this came from, actually. This hat.
And I see you have in your hand a book.
One of the B-12s got very ambitious and wrote a book about the history of B-12.
When did he write it? You don't...
It's been within the last few years.
Oh. Does it mention Wabash College at all?
Oh, yes. It has a passage on each school that was involved in B-12.
I'd like to have a chance to look at it.
Okay.
Well then, after you graduated from Wabash, what did you do?
Went to University of Michigan. Thought I wanted to go on for advanced degrees, and especially in psychology. But once I got there, after a couple of months, I decided I hadn't been out of school for quite some time.
Well, you had been going to school pretty continuously, hadn't you?
Yes. So I came back to Crawfordsville and wound up at Donnelly's.
And I believe Carolyn, who was Carolyn Brown, or married, also worked at Donnelly's.
She did, yes.
But while you were in the service, she was working
Yes.
at Donnelly's. She was working as a secretary.
As a secretary in the personnel department.
I have questioned somebody about what role Donnelly's played, or how did they keep their workforce, and it was said that they didn't have any government program. Is that correct? You know?
I have no idea, Gene.
I'm just curious as to who manned or womaned all the machines.
I suspect both, men and women.
But they wouldn't have gotten any, the men wouldn't have gotten any permanent. But of course there would be older people too.
There would be older people, sure.
Well, tell us a little bit about your family. You have
3 children. The older one is Marcia, who's at Ann Arbor, Michigan. She and her husband. And they recently had a son She was a perennial scholar, I think was a way of saying it. You know, she went to school forever and ever. Although she got a degree from Antioch, and her husband, who had a master's degree in fine arts, is a potter, decided to move to, well, in fact, he took his advanced degree at Ann Arbor, at the University of Michigan. And for a number of years, Marcia would take 1 or 2 courses a year, as I say, perennial scholar. Well, she finally graduated in social work and has done, well, for many years, has been counseling and things of that nature, while he works as a professional potter.
He's had a great success.
Oh, yes, very much so. The second child is Eric, and he's been also a bookworm, if you will. In fact, he went to the University of Chicago, got a master's degree in history, and then one in library science, your field, of course. And worked at the Indiana Historical Society as the archivist for a number of years. And recently went to WWII as the archivist.
And he teaches a course there too.
He started this last year, yes, teaching a course in art. Teaches a course about archives, I guess is a way of saying it. The third child is Anne, and she and her husband live in Mobile, Alabama, and they have a child recently who's now just about 8 months old.
And what does she do?
She is a nurse. He spends most of her time in the delivery area and loves it.
You mentioned Marcia being a perennial scholar and was sort of a perennial scholar too, wasn't she?
It seemed to be that way for a while.
She started out in crafts, I believe.
Crafts.
Arts and crafts. Was it in Illinois somewhere? Galesburg? Did she go to school?
She went to school, not Galesburg for about 2 years, yes. But her real interest for many years, prior to going to college, was to become a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And she finally decided after she got married that, well, she wanted to go to school. She didn't want to go to school that long. So she settled on being a nurse.
No? Should we take a pause for a minute? See if there's anything. Are there any other questions? Okay. This project is being done in connection with the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And I forgot to mention that we're speaking on April 16th, 1991. And I want to thank you very much for
You're welcome, Jean.
agreeing to being interviewed. It certainly brings us a different perspective than some of the other interviews we've had, which have entailed actual fighting or in combat
Sure.
in some way. So thank you.
You're welcome.